And then thereafter, 2 days later, meeting with UK Prime Minister Theresa May. And we know for sure that UK is a very strategic ally of US in many fronts. I want to hear from you. I mean, we saw that tweet from President Donald Trump saying how elated he was, meeting President Uhuru Kenyatta. And we know for sure that Trump has a Twitter following of 50.4 million people. And also we saw another tweet from Melania Trump, the First Lady, who has a following of about 10 million people. Is this good for Kenya?
Well, I think it's going to be great for Kenya and for Africa as a whole, because Kenya is strategically, geographically positioned right in the heart of Africa. But for strategic alliance, the Americans want to be more closer in terms of trade, in terms of security, in terms of development between the two nations going forward. But this all means great in terms of positioning the country for investments. Right now, President Kenyatta and the government Kenya very much focus on the big four, and to increase manufacturing, to increase trade, to increase exports. One thing I like what you highlighted to the Kenyans who are watching today is that we have a deficit in our trade of over $10 billion US. So for this country to increase employment, to increase more opportunities for the youth. Our population of 41 million is soon going to be 51 million. Half of our youth are looking for employment. So manufacturing will trigger employment, but also by increasing trade and closing this deficit, we are going to move to, in the next 5 years, the ambition for the government is to reach $1 trillion exports. That means massive foreign exchange earnings for Kenyans. So all this between America, Britain, the top countries in the world, China trading with Kenya, and Kenya also increasing trade, increases employment.
Iraki, you are talking about, Britain, coming back to its former allies, who he deserted many years ago.
Former colony.
Former colonies, actually. And
but now partners.
Now they're calling them partners. Very interesting word there. When you look at trade between or Kenya's exports to Great Britain or to UK, it has somehow stagnated. I mean, we have not been doing good business with Great Britain, and in that space, China has come on board. The question is this: do you see a situation whereby Britain is likely to append the order?
I think, in my opinion, it is too late. When I was a small young boy and very innocent, all the cars I used to see on the Kenyan road were Ford, Leyland, Austin, Rover, Land Rover, and all the items I used to find in our household were made in England or made in Great Britain. Now it is made in China. I think Britain has come, but in my opinion, it is too late.
It is too late.
They have come when the horses are bolted. The Chinese have come, Americans have come back, the Turkish are here, the Indians are here. So Britain has come back, but she is going to compete with the very many other countries that have tried to come back into this country. The French are back with their Peugeot. So what I'm foreseeing in the next few years is a very competitive market for other countries in this country. But it's good for us, because the more competition there is, the more likely we are going to get value for our money. And competition always increases quality and makes life better for us. If you are a young girl and you are very beautiful and people are trying to marry you, chances are you command a higher dowry. So I'm seeing the Britons, the Chinese, the Americans, they're all trying to quote us. So we are going to get better value for our country. Exports. My friend Diaz forgot to say that when President Uhuru Kenyatta and the First Lady of Kenya goes to White House, there are millions of people watching. And that is going to be translated into better publicity for Kenya. So we expect a lot of tourists to come to this country. And that is good for our economy. So I'm seeing all this diplomacy going to UK Prime Minister coming here, our President going to US, and then going to China. It's good for publicity. But my hope is that at the end of all those trips and visits, Wanjiko, the common man, the common lady on the streets is going to benefit. It should be about maximum good for the maximum number of people.
And also, he's talking about, he's giving a very interesting analogy there of a beautiful lady. But the question is this, I mean, how then do we ensure that all these suitors are not here to exploit this beautiful girl?
Well, it's true, and also I just want to add to what he said, which is very valuable and important, is the number of tourists coming into Kenya. 60 million tourists coming to Africa. Kenya is getting per annum 1.5 million only, so there is great opportunity during these partnership meetings that Kenya will be marketed strongly, and also the number of tourists coming in will grow to over the 2 million mark, going towards the 3 million mark, which contributes greatly billions of dollars annually to the economy of Kenya. Now, so we have to look at it very beneficial, because Kenya also has got a lot of talent, and Africa also have a lot of students studying in the US and studying also in the UK. For example, Kimani in the US, the universities contribute over 95 billion pounds every year as contributing to the economy of the UK. So a lot of training and development partnerships are being signed, but also a lot of students from Africa are going into the main universities in the UK. So this is also increasing their business and their trade. Again, also while they are trying to also work with Africa, Britain is also now looking at low-hanging fruits, South America, Asia, and the whole of Africa. So definitely we need to be very competitive. We need to position the country in a strong way, and it has to be a win-win strategy, so that as we increase number of exports, we get a higher number of tourists, we also are able to manage to see we are having high exports of tea and cut flowers, and Kenya is really world famous for cut flowers. So I really think there's going to be increase of trade, and Kenyans are quite balanced in terms of a win-win strategy between the 2 or 3 different countries we are marketing to.
Tell me this, I mean, when you look at trade between Africa and UK, I mean, it has dropped from about 32 billion US dollars back in the year 2012 to around 16.5 billion US dollars in 2016. And when you look at the same, here in Kenya, imports from UK dropped by around 19 billion shillings from a high of 49 billion shillings in 2013 to 30 billion shillings last year. Is there space for UK in this continent, honestly?
Well, now, for example, the Africa continent is going to be very strong. As you're aware, 44 presidents and governments have come together to have the Continental Africa Trade Agreement. So what is going to happen now globally, intra-Africa trade is just around 15%, while in Europe and in Asia, they are trading among themselves at 60%. So Africa as a bloc is going to be supplying each other, and tourism within Africa is going to grow also. So the economies of Africa is going to become a superpower. So Britain may also tap in that, in terms of we will also grow our economies, we'll grow our investments from industrialization into more manufacturing. So there's going to be more trade between different blocs. So I strongly feel that the African nations are going to grow much faster. And Britain has a chance, but they have to be very competitive in terms of pricing, and they also have to give incentives, trade incentives, and also they've got to lift trade and non-tariff barriers in the UK, so that the Africa countries can trade more with the UK.
Theresa May, said that the dreams and the desires of UK is to be the largest investor in Africa among the G7 members by the year 2022. But even there are doubts whether by the year 2022, whether UK will still be a member of the G7, bearing in mind that there are other economies that are coming up. But tell me this, for UK, I mean, to position itself better here in Kenya, what do they need to do?
I think it is true that I think it's a good target to become a major player in Africa. The first question is, how is Britain going to compete against the other countries coming to Africa? I'm talking about particularly China. If you look at the Kenyan roads today, I've seen American cars are back. If you cross the University Way here, you find American companies coming back here. KFC, Burger King, Pizza Hut, Ford, Chevy, and so on. All those are going to come to compete with Britain. So if Britain has to come and compete with the new players, they have to come up with very innovative products, unique products that other countries cannot come up with. And that's not going to be very easy to do. So they can compete, but they have a lot of work to do. One, they have to be very innovative. Two, they have to start understanding the Kenyan mind again. Kenyans today are very different from the Kenyans that Britons used to trade with in 70s and 60s. They are now more confident. They are more aware of the global trends. They are more choosy. They are more educated. So the starting point is to start to understand the new Kenyan consumer. Very different. And I should add what my friend said, Diaz. We should not be targeting 2 million tourists. That is very unambitious. France gets 82 million tourists. We should be getting at least 50 million tourists, equivalent to our population. But it will be interesting to find out how Britons come back in the next few years. It will be very interesting.
Interesting, and maybe you'll be working at BBC soon, so there's a lot of partnerships.
No, we need you here.
I think I'm needed more here. But I still want to find out from you. I mean, UK is Kenya's largest, second largest source of foreign source of tourists after United States. It was overtaken in 2016. I want to hear from you. Is this the best they can do?
Well, in terms of number of tourists that come out of Britain, don't forget, London is one of the biggest cities in the world, and it's a connecting hub. A lot of tourists coming from various countries, not only in Europe, coming out of the Americas, transit out of London into Africa and into Kenya. So today, historically, Kenya has a very, very big source market of tourism and tourists coming out of Britain into Kenya, and this can grow into big numbers. But also that we're getting a lot of tourists from within Africa ourselves. And again, the British tourists also come into multi-destinations in Africa. They love the islands, and they love Kilimanjaro, they love the Masai Mara. So Africa as a whole is marketing strongly as a bloc, and a lot of numbers of British tourists is continuing to show positive growth.
Yes,
I think that's a point I would want to point us to. There's something I must raise here. The number of British tourists coming to this country is about 160,000 a year. That is a trickle. I believe that is a market we have not exploited. If you look at the historical connection between this country and Britain, should be getting maybe 10 or more, 10 million tourists. Look at the legacy of the Britons in this country. The Happy Valley, the houses, they left big buildings and so on. The history of the Rameas, the history of Carnegies, and all those other Britons who have been here. They even left their children and grandchildren here. So if we can market that historical connection, there should be a lot of Britons coming here as tourists.
And but the Lunatic Express.
Yes, but we don't market that. We just talk about the big five.
We have to increase the level of marketing. Every November, the World Travel Market in London, which is famous for marketing and bringing partnerships of a number of tourists through British organizations into Kenya. This is one opportunity that we should really strongly work on. Again, a lot of the British tourists also go to South Africa, go to Egypt and other competitive African nations. So Kenya has a big opportunity to reach 3-4 million very fast as a quick win.
So where is the disconnect here?
We just focus too much on the big five.
The big four.
No, the big five in tourism.
Oh, in terms of big five in tourism, yes. But yeah,
and the beaches, huh?
We need to also market our culture, our food, our fashion, our sports, and increase our experience tourism. I mean, that's what today the modern tourist is looking for, is a new experience, shopping experiences, music, and having big events in Kenya. A lot of people would come for a sporting event in Kenya. That would attract an Africa tournament for football, or having also a big event on culture and music. This is which will attract a lot of tourists into this country.
And Iraki, you're raising a very pertinent issue here. Like, for example, how many Britons are aware that the coronation of Queen Elizabeth happened when she was here at the Treetops Hotel, actually?
That's a good question. The other day I was looking at the Kenya Statistical Abstract of 1955 in the middle of Mau Mau. And something surprised me by the number of foreigners from other countries who wanted to come and become permanent residents. There were Norwegians, there were Swiss, there were Swedish, there were Germans, there were Canadians. It shows that for a long time, this country has had very good connection with other nations. But you have never exploited that. We have never exploited the fact that the Queen was here during, when she became the Queen. The father died when she was here. Yeah. Nobody has publicized that. We have never publicized the fact that Taita Taveta was a theater of World War I. A lot of people would come and see what was happening there.
Yeah.
We have never exploited the fact that just the north of our country is a very big desert. Very chubby desert. How many Kenyans even know there's a desert here? We have never even exploited our Rift Valley.
That's true. But Prince William came for his honeymoon in
That
Mount
is
Kenya.
it.
Yeah.
That is it. So we have a lot of things beyond the big five that we can market and make this country great in terms of tourists.
And actually, probably, maybe this is where we are losing it, because, I mean, the big five, they don't change.
That's true.
I mean, you don't expect a lion, to grow horns so that I can come and see it next year, with the horns. The same lion that I saw, 10 years ago is probably the same lion I'm likely to see. But there are a lot of things I think we are not getting right here. And the faster we do this, the better for us. Tell me this. We were talking about, Donald Trump and mentioning Kenya in one of his tweets. How have we taken advantage of this, by the way?
Well, I think digitally, the Kenya Tourism Board and the Brand Kenya Board, if you look at the Investment Authority of Kenya, all these have, Kenya is very strong digitally in Africa. Africa now is, internet penetration is growing very strongly. So within the African continent, there's been a lot of retweets, there's been a lot of positive conversation. There's a whole strategy for the Kenya Tourism Board. Now Kenya Airways is flying October 28 direct flights between Nairobi and New York. So it's a huge marketing across the American market. Again, the global alliances within the airlines, between the Sky Team, Delta, Kenya Airways, will feed the whole American market into the direct flight. So I can see that this all marketing, everyone's taking advantage. All the marketing agencies are positioning the country very strongly for tourism and also for investors to come into Kenya.
And Iraki is talking about, direct flights to US. And this appears to be very big news for Kenya. What we don't know is that 81 countries, they have direct flights to US. It's not like it's a big thing, right?
Ethiopians have been flying to the US for a very long time.
Same as Senegal.
And I don't think for an average traveler going to the US, I don't think the flight is the most important thing. I think we need to go beyond that. Why do people want to go to the US? Why do people want to come from the US-based country? So before we think so much about the direct flight, let's look at the fundamentals. Why are people flying to Kenya going to the US? So if we can develop tourism, for example, we are going to have a lot of them using that airline. And when we start talking about tourism, there's one very important factor we have not exploited, the President Obama factor. That connection to Kenya can bring a lot of tourists. They keep on saying that Obama was the first black president, but I'm not very happy with that statement, because if President Obama is black, what color am I?
You're Kenyan.
Very interesting argument there. Tell me this.
Yes.
The Chinese market is definitely such a huge market, with a population of almost 1.4 billion people, much bigger, than the African continent. How well are we positioned to ensure that we get enough visitors and enough numbers, from India? For example, in 2016, 47,000 Chinese visitors came to Kenya. That's a drop in the ocean, right?
No, you're very right. I mean, Kimani, the opportunity for the number of tourists out of Asia into Kenya and also rest of Africa is huge, it's tremendous. And if you look at the Mara migration has been at peak during July and August. A lot of Chinese tourists and also tourists from India are coming into Kenya. So we need to really strongly, sell the culture of Kenya, sell a lot more experiences of Kenya to the Chinese. And the Chinese tourists are very interesting tourists, because they are not the top dollar tourists. They're more into the medium hotels, into the medium destinations into Kenya. And Kenya has very many 3-star and 4-star opportunities. Yeah. So I see both India has top-end tourists and medium-end tourists. This is where we need to really increase our trade and our tourist marketing, especially with the Kenya Tourism Board. Opportunities are very, very interesting from those two markets.
Iraki, I can see you are burning with a point.
Yes, because anytime I hear China being mentioned, my mouth waters. Have 1 billion middle-class consumers. It's a big market. If we can just get 50 million to come to this country as tourists, we are sorted. But one way to make more Chinese tourists come to this country is again to exploit our historical connection. I don't know how many students in high school know that Chinese were in the East Coast. They came to Maridi in 1418, long before the Portuguese. In 2005, some Chinese experts or scientists came to Ramu. They did some DNA tests, and they were able to prove that Chinese left some genetic imprints. So if we can make that historical connection, you see more Chinese getting more excited about this country. It's very good that just across the other University of Nairobi, we are now teaching Mandarin, or Chinese as you want to call it. So when people come to know about China through languages and so on, I expect more Chinese tourists to come to this country. To me, that is another market we have not exploited. Much bigger than UK, much bigger than the US.
Than the US.
Yes.
Gentlemen, because we have to wind up, what advice would you have to brand Kenya?
O'Brien, you're asking me a very hard question because
he's here, he's listening.
For me to answer that question, they would have to pay me some money as a consultant. But,
Free not.
Yes, but I'll give you free
publicity.
Yeah.
I think for Brad Kenya to give us more tourists, one thing we must do is to change the image of this country. There are too many people in this country who are pessimists. I want to talk more positive about this country.
Excellent.
There's one thing that President Moi said when I heard him when I was a very young boy. He said something that was very funny but very interesting. Kama mama yako hana meno, utaambia kila mtu hana meno. So if you are more positive about this country, we are going to get more tourists, we are going to have more people coming visiting this country. And very important, let's go beyond the big five. Let's look at cultural tourism and other avenues.
That's great advice.
Now I'll give you the fee note.
I definitely will pay for the fee note. I think that Kenyans now are great brand ambassadors for the country, and what he says, the more positive the narrative, the greater the people perceive our country. Thanks, Kimani.
Very well, gentlemen, thank you so very much indeed for your time and for your insight. And we look more forward to having you here. And of course, let's hope that our country scales to higher heights.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Very well.